Welcome into another episode of the Fourth and Goal podcast. I'm your host, Drew, along here with my co-host, Rob, and we have a jam-packed episode talking about the absurdity that's been going on in free agency. Rob, just want to hear your thoughts. I don't know any of your thoughts on free agency yet. We haven't talked about this. We've saved it for now. What are your thoughts?
Dude, I'm hyped. And, I don't get very hyped about NFL free agency or trade deadlines, right? Not a lot of things normally happen at these. It's not like the NBA where it's just the whole landscape can shift. But man, this has been an absolute bombshell of a couple days. I have had WhatsApp groups blowing up. I've been in meetings checking Twitter and trying to figure out what's going to be popping off next. I just see, a lot of big names are moving, really big deals. A lot of teams that aren't normally frisky at this time of year. So I'm a big fan of the last couple of days. We had to call an emergency podcast really just to put it all out there because things are changing. How do you feel, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the salary cap went up by $30 million this offseason, and more than projected. It was projected to be 240, ended up being 255, and I think that that to me is the reason why you're seeing teams being so spend happy, because they're shit, here's found money. It's kind of when you're I mean, I'm going to sound very childish when I say this. It's kind of like when you put on your winter coat for the first time and you reach into your pocket and there's a $20 bill and it's well, I'm going to go get a nice lunch today.
Fam, I still celebrate that every time I go home because I live in tropical climate. So every now and then I'm back home in the cold northern Kentucky wilderness, and all of a sudden I'm putting on one of those raincoats and it's in there. So man, that's not a child's thing, but yeah, I feel that it reminds me of I forget the exact year, but it was the NBA free agency where the salary cap went up, and Joe Johnson was a free agent, and all those guys, and Joe Johnson of all people ended up signing a $200 million contract for 8 years with the Brooklyn Nets. I don't even know if they were the Brooklyn Nets at the time. It reminds me a lot of that kind of, shebang. But let's go. So what are the names that like you said, we found the 20 owners are going a little spend happy. We got a couple $100 million men. We got people moving. What are the big highlights? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, so the $100 million men, I mean, most people know this, so we're going to go through it quickly, but Kirk Cousins, 4 years, $180 million. That's the big boy.
Get that paper, boo-boo.
That man's going to be near 40 years old by the end of this contract. That man has one playoff win and, just fucking, slaying.
Yeah, but he's got a hell of a Netflix documentary, and that's all it takes, baby.
Damn straight. You got Chris Jones staying with the Chiefs for 5 years, just shy of $160 million. Brian Burns, 5 years, $150 million with the New York Giants. That was an interesting one. Was shocked the Giants made a splash like that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get a little bit more into the kind of mechanics around that trade, but it's very Carolina of them to do that. Let's put it that way. But yeah, man, and again, just back to the Kirk Cousins thing. I saw a meme the other day where it was Kirk Cousins' salary in the league, and it's in his Washington days, and then even his Viking days, and then it's just touching. The dude is cashing this year, so that's amazing.
Dude has been cashing because when he signed with the Vikings, he was the first ever player to get a 3-year fully guaranteed contract.
Right, that's what it was looking at. It was looking at as his guaranteed money. And this contract's huge guaranteed. He's got $100 million guaranteed, I believe.
It's $90 million guaranteed, but he has a rolling guarantee, so he gets an additional $10 million guaranteed, I believe, next offseason.
Right, so total can be there for him. Dude, I mean, shout out! Hey, I'm never mad at the players getting the bag, even if it means going to the Atlanta Falcons, who we both had trouble picking this last year, and maybe we'll get into them a little bit more. The other couple one that you guys that you didn't mention that I think is noteworthy on the $100 million is the Christian Wilkinson heading to the Raiders for 4 years, $100 million. We got Baker finding a home. I think everybody's a fan of the Baker Mayfield revival in Tampa Bay. So it's like a good fit
100%.
all around. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
that's a feel-good story there, right?
No, like, because Baker Mayfield went through this really weird, like, because he came into the league, people were like, okay, this guy seems okay. And then he was, like, in all those commercials, like, before he had done anything, and everyone was like, okay, young buck, like, screw off. He wasn't
He took the Browns to the playoffs. That's doing something.
But I think, like, he really hadn't been that successful. So, like, he was kind of down.
Right.
And then it's like when he got, like, shipped out, and they were like, we want Deshaun Watson. We want, like, 25 felony charges, Deshaun Watson on our team instead of you. People kind of were like,
allegedly.
Alleged, yeah. I said charges. I didn't say convictions.
True.
I was good. I was good. But like, I think everyone kind of started to get on the Baker Mayfield train, and then it's like he wasn't supposed to be any good. It was like, okay, this is like an afterthought, and seeing him be good now, it's like, you know what? We're okay with this.
I remember he went and pooped the bed for a couple games over in Los Angeles for the Rams at the end of the year before, right?
Yeah,
so he was already.
Well.
I had already chalked him up to like Kirk Cousins, backup, going to show up and maybe like bomb it for 350 yards for the last 4 games of a season when a quarterback gets hurt, right? Like I think we had already relegated him to that level. And so to see him find his groove, he looks like he's enjoying ball there, right? Like he's shed some of that, like you said, the media hype that had chased him, kind of shed those demons, and just has had this like fun backyard mud football revival, right? Like that's what I feel with this kid, and he's got a 3-year, $100 million contract, bro. Let's go, Baker. There you go. I've forgiven you for fucking losing my fantasy championship 2 years ago when you put up 4 points on the Los Angeles Rams. But
yeah, the fact that you had Baker in your fantasy championship,
it was a 2-quarterback league. I had some hurt injuries. It was tough.
Okay, fine, but yeah, it was because Baker. He was everywhere. Like I'm super psyched for him. And then I think our last one, Robert Hunt, got $100 million.
Yep, over 5 years
from the Panthers.
There you go, boys. And the Panthers, again, we'll get to that a little bit later because there's a reason why they've made one of my lists. But so other than so of those $100 million men, who do you think was the most deserving of their contract?
Yep.
And which team just found that $20 and blew it on the strippers right away?
My favorite of those $100 million contracts is Christian Wilkins with the Raiders. I really like that contract. I think he's a fantastic player. I think it's a match made in heaven complementary piece with Max Crosby. Like the hardest thing for Max Crosby was it's like every team could just be like, okay, put all our effort into stopping Max Crosby. You can't do that now. So you not only got a really good player, but you unlocked another really good player. So like you almost got a bit of a 2-for-1 in this. I love it. He's still a young guy. This was a guy who was shocked the Dolphins didn't franchise tag, and props to the Raiders for jumping on top of this and saying, we're going to capitalize. This was my favorite of those contracts. Honorable mention to Chris Jones. Like, obviously keeping Chris Jones, massive move for the Chiefs. They had to do it, but a lot older and a lot more expensive contract. So that's why I take the Christian Wilkins.
Yeah, and shout out to our man Antonio Pierce, who I think we both like. I think he probably had a role that was a big defensive guy, right? Like, he was whispering in the ears of the GMs. You stole my thunder a little bit with the Chris Jones contract. I think that was just like the most suited all around, right? It was just like, you got to keep him. He's the heart and soul. We have the cap room. And if we're going to keep this dynasty going, that's the sort of move you need to make. So I think that was just like the most sound decision out there, player and team fit. I think the Robert Hunt contract is got to be the one that stands out as like, if you had asked me who the $100 million men were heading into this offseason, he wouldn't have been making my list. Let's put it that way.
Obviously, the extra years on the back of the end of it compared to some guys helps. Like Justin Matabuke with only a 4-year deal. Had he been 5 years, he would have easily cleared because he hit 98 million. He's just off the
Right. This is one of those like arbitrary thresholds that make it something we talk about. But he's obviously the threshold. This is where like the guys that don't make it. This is like the cutoff people that don't make the NCAA dance, right? Yeah. They're like, oh, well, we were better than Texas Christian University. It's like, all right, well, we're really just drawing at straws here. We have some other notables, I think, though, if you want to head there.
Yeah, I was going to say the other contract I didn't like was the Brian Burns because you gave the Robert Hunt. I didn't like the Brian Burns deal. I'm not saying anything bad about Brian Burns. I think Brian Burns is a fantastic player. I just don't think Brian Burns has done enough in this league to show that he's worth $30 million per year for 5 years. Like, he's been good. I'd happily pay him 20, maybe even 25. I'm not saying he wasn't worthy of a $100 million contract if it's over 5 years, but he's not worth what he's getting paid, in my opinion.
And a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick.
Correct.
So there's more collateral on top of the contract. That second-round pick in 2024, in particular, could be quite juicy.
That'll be a high-ish pick because it's the Giants' pick. It's not a low second.
That's what I'm saying. This is like a late first-rounder, essentially, that they're throwing in on top of a monstrous contract. So, yeah, I agree that one is not so sterling. Well, for the franchise, shout out Brian Burns. Of course, we are always on the team.
100%.
Players,
Brian Burns, Robert Hunt. We're gonna say these are bad contracts for the teams, but like, fuck yeah, let's fucking go, boys.
Yeah. We are big fans of this. This is the Bobby Bonilla type of love.
Oh yeah.
Like to
spread. Oh yeah.
It's a good. My man Drew, he launders money for the mafia, so obviously he likes himself a good deal.
Yeah,
he's a
100%.
big fan of a good deal.
I'm a fan of a good deal, but I respect the piece.
So before we get into the winners and losers, we do have a couple other free agent signings. I don't think obviously we can't go into all of them. It's been a huge offseason, a lot of names, a lot of second-tier, third-tier names. Obviously, we got Russell Wilson going to the Steelers. We'll elaborate on that a little bit more later. I think my favorite of these kind of like middle ones are the defensive backs that got franchised. So you have Josh Allen, the Jaguar defensive back, and defensive end, sorry. And then Antoine Winfield Jr., who, again, is sort of like a heart and soul pick. Had the taunting against Tyreek Hill in the Super Bowl winning team. I've always loved him since then. But in general, just like he's one of the best young defensive players in the game. Tampa Bay's always been a strong secondary team. And so I like the Baker, Antoine Winfield signings. I had Tampa Bay close to making my top winners, but I think they've done an excellent job. Just kind of like, all right, this worked. No one expected this to work. Now it's working. Let's see how much longer this might work.
Yep, I don't disagree. To note on the franchise tag, because you brought in a few franchise tag guys. So there were 8 guys franchise tagged. We haven't talked about it since the franchise tags went out. But 4 of them, being Brian Burns, Justin Matabuke, Jalen Johnson, and Michael Pittman, already have contracts, which is shockingly quick for these franchise tag guys to get deals done. The others remaining for contracts are Antoine Winfield Jr. and Josh Allen, as you mentioned, along with L'Jarius Sneed and T. Higgins, with Sneed expected to be traded. There's a lot of talk about him getting traded, and T. Higgins requesting a trade.
And the fans in Cincinnati are requesting a trade, too. I'm plugged into the bar scene in the greater Cincinnati area, and I can tell you the talk around the bar stools is that's a deep position, actually, in Cincinnati. So I think that was a bit of a strategic move with the franchise. I don't think T. Higgins boots up for the Bengals come the fall.
Interesting. I thought he would, but on the tag, and he'd be gone this offseason. But that's an interesting take. I like it. Either way, let's move on to our top 3 winners of free agency. We'll start with winners. We'll start with positivity, and then we'll move to negativity. So give me your top 1. We'll go back and forth. You go first.
All right, if I'm going to throw one winner out there, it's Derrick Henry going to the Baltimore Ravens.
Okay.
And I don't obviously I hate the Baltimore Ravens, but we talked a lot last year, especially heading into the season, about running backs and whether or not they're going to get paid and the good fit. And Derrick Henry really had a very bad season for Derrick Henry, all things considered. He needed like 180 yards to bail your ass out of a bet that seemed like a surefire lock to begin with. So you have a hard bruising running back which is like guaranteed to deteriorate, right? And to go to a team like the Baltimore Ravens, who understands the run, who respects tough-nosed, like physical football, who needs depth because for some reason they always get injured a lot and they're just putting in guys, especially late in the season. I just think this is an amazing fit for him. I think it's a great fit for Baltimore as well. And it just goes to show that at the end of the day, these running backs are still making a little bit of waves, still getting paid. And so when I thought that he might not get, he might just get I just thought it was better than where I expected him to go. And so shout out Derrick Henry. I loved watching him play. Great to see him land on a team that I think will extend his career and maybe even give him a chance to get the ring that he deserves.
Yeah, see, this is where I got a bit of hot take on this one. I actually don't love the Derrick Henry to the Ravens. I see it all over the internet. People love it. I think I look at Derrick Henry and how I've always thought about Derrick Henry is like, this guy is successful when you constantly give him the rock because he's so physical that it's like he just beats you up. He doesn't beat you in the first quarter. He beats you in the fourth quarter. Right. And so it's like when you're on a team that you got to split carries with Lamar Jackson, and then you're also going to have to, split carries with
Josh Edwards, Justice Hill,
Mitchell, whatever it might be. Yeah. Then I don't think Derrick Henry is going to be as effective. Obviously, he's still Derrick Henry. Obviously, he'll still be fine. But I think what made Derrick Henry great is going to be lost with how Baltimore wants to run it. So I don't think it's going to be as good as people expect. That's my hot take. I acknowledge it's an unpopular opinion.
No, I think I actually think you might have some legitimacy there. The question is Derrick Henry a back that can come in the third and fourth quarter on fresh legs and do the kind of work that he normally does in the second half? Or is that a result of being in the groove and being in the game and then eventually busting it open? Right? It remains to be seen.
For 2 quarters. And
right.
Because every time you drop that shoulder into that linebacker, I'll tell you right now, it's a hell of a lot easier to tackle a Christian McCaffrey, at least in terms of on your body, than it is to tackle a Derrick Henry.
For sure. A team that would have loved him, Pittsburgh Steelers. That's the kind of team that would feed him the rock all day and keep it going. So I do hate to see him in Baltimore.
Not with Artie Smith. Artie Smith spreads the ball out, man.
Yeah, true. I forgot now. No longer blaming Canada for things. But anyways, my other 2 winners, I'm keeping it in running backs. Again, I just think that this offseason was a little antithesis to the one before, where it was kind of like, oh, are we paying running backs? Are they worthwhile anymore? Well, okay, maybe they didn't get paid the same amount of dollars as some of the other positions, but it's nice to see them moving and being considered kind of strategic pieces. So my next winner was Saquon Barkley going to the Eagles. I think that's a good fit for him. I think there's a lot of potential in the run game and in the pass game there, and the Eagles obviously needed to do something to whatever malaise they had at the end of last year. And he got off the New York Football Giants, which, again, shout out to him. And then the last one for me was the young Houston Texans, having a great offseason, re-signing some of the young talent, really just being like, look, no one expected us to do much last year. Let's make sure we keep the young talent that brought us to the playoffs, even won a playoff game for us. And so I like to see them keeping a nucleus together and signing 1 or 2 additional to add to that roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think Saquon, I one of the teams I had thought about putting in my list was just the Eagles in general. I think they've made a lot of moves to make their team better. Now, let me be clear. The Eagles are going to be in a hell of a lot of trouble in a few years. If you look at what they're doing, if the cap ever, stalls a little bit, because they're just pushing that cap into the future like no other team I've ever seen. It's you look at the Jalen Hurts contract as an example. It's his cap is only $13 million this year. But guess what? If he doesn't re-sign, it's $86 million in his first year after the contract.
Damn. Yeah. So okay. I haven't dug too much into the scriptures.
So it's this is what the Eagles are doing. They're really they're pushing all their contracts as far back as possible, which is fine. So long as the cap keeps going up, and then they just keep doing this. But the second you get like a COVID year or something, or like the NFL has a bad year or a bad TV deal, all of a sudden, flatline and the Eagles are fucked. So, like, hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully the NFL keeps growing, and I give the Eagles props. If you're talking about who's a better team in 2024, they're up there, but long term, we'll see.
Hey, the Warriors made a play very similar to that when we kept our core together and made a run to a couple of series finals.
The difference between that in NFL is like in basketball, you can pay over the cap. You just have to pay luxury.
Yeah, you just pay the
But in NFL, that's not an option. So you literally just got to get rid of guys. Like you literally got to do what the Buffalo Bills did and just cut everyone.
Yeah, you make a good point.
Yeah,
yeah, that's actually a funny part of like the luxury tax in the NBA. It's kind of like if you want to pay a bunch of money and you end up winning, you can perpetuate that over and over because then with all the winning, you can afford more luxury tax. And the Warriors benefited that quite handsomely. But we'll stick to the NFL and their rules now.
Yeah. So the three guys I got are three people / teams I have. One, it's Kirk. It's Kirk Cousins. The man, like the projection on his contract was like $70 million over 2 years. This man got $180 million over 4 years. 36-year-old man, albeit, and like most quarterbacks aren't successful into their late 30s. Like there's been very few exceptions. Like outside of Tom Brady, literally Tom Brady is the only quarterback we've ever seen be successful. Like some people want to say Aaron Rodgers, but my argument would be, well, his 38-year-old season wasn't great, and he was injured his entirety of his 39-year-old season. We haven't seen him really play well since 37.
How old was Elway when he won back-to-back and retired?
Elway would have been about mid-30s.
Yeah, 34. I want to say 34, 35. But yeah, that's the only one I could think of besides Brady. Because Manning, although he did win a championship and retired on it, his arm was shot by then. He was just an incredible game manager with the best defense you could find. Oh, yeah. That was the Von Miller.
And he was still mid-30s. Like, he wasn't even late 30s. He was like 36, 37 at that time. So it's like the fact that Kirk Cousins managed to pull this money in, he's my number one winner of free agency. Like, get that bag, Kirk. Good for you.
Yeah, fine. He's a good winner. Good pick. Yeah. Good pick.
Second, I got the Green Bay Packers. I think they made some good moves. Xavier McKinney fills a hole, maybe a bit of an overpay, but he fills a massive hole at safety for them. And I think the Josh Jacobs deal, like I love, because it's so little guaranteed. They've basically signed him to 4 straight franchise tags. That's the way I like think about it. Because like after the first year, every year is just ad hoc. Like they could just cut him for basically nothing. So it's like
right.
Okay, or for like minimum.
He's
loss.
Been injury prone. He's been injury prone.
So, but it's like, you know, hey, if you get a really good running back in Josh Jacobs, that to me that's an upgrade over Aaron Jones with your weapons everywhere, your super young offense. So I love it for the Packers. And my third is, you know what? It's the Chiefs. Like they didn't lose anyone major. You win a championship. Sure. And you don't lose anyone major, that is a massive W. You almost always see these championship teams have to lose guys. They're not, and they're in decent shape. Like, God, that's scary.
Well, you know why? Because you take Pat Mahomes away from that roster. And it's not like, you know what I mean? No one was thinking they were going to win last year, really, until kind of the playoffs. There was like the doldrums of
the defense was incredible, though. Like the defense
carried
that team.
And so what I'm saying is they have a lot of really good value guys. It wasn't like one of these bloated freeloader teams where it's like everyone signed on to just try to like sneak out a ship or something.
Like the Rams
exactly. Where then the year after it's just or the Raptors. Sorry, had to go there.
I don't even understand. One, boom. Two, I don't even agree with what you're saying at all because no one wants to sign with the Raptors.
Drew triggered me. My point was they won a championship and then they just let their good players go and then where are they now? But I digress.
We're not.
But no, I agree. Yeah. But I do agree with the Packers. Again, it's the Packers remind me a lot of Tampa Bay and Houston, where it's like the young teams, no one expected much out of them. They've performed, they're showing up, and keep that together and see where it takes you. So
yeah, I'm surprised you didn't have the Steelers as one of your big winners. I thought you would have loved the Steelers free agency.
So that's a good transition because I do have the Steelers actually in one of my free agency losers. Not the worst loser. My worst loser is the Carolina Panthers. But the reason why is I think Deontay Johnson was a really good wide receiver for us. He picked up the slack that George Pickens, for some reason his attitude's not there yet.
Yep.
I think when it really comes, I think defensively we did well, but I think it just was like I have to now root for Russell Wilson. I think that alone, I couldn't. Like, actually, part of me, and maybe this is I think Kenny Pickett's moxie and small hands were sufficient. Part of me thinks that this might actually be a really good fit. Like, he's old. He's kind of like a game manager. He brings that locker room, like, kind of control, gets George Pickens caring about football again. We have a really good 1-2 punch in Najee and Jalen Warren in the backfield. We got a young offensive line, a great defense. Maybe this is going to be an incredible fit, and this is just kind of the game manager / like make enough plays to keep us in contention, similar to what like the Broncos were doing towards the end of the year last year. It's just hard for me right now. And so maybe I'll warm up to this free agent market for us. But, maybe Sierra in a luxury box will make me feel better about a Russell Wilson signing. But for now, a little worried about what's cooking in Steel Town.
Yeah, I'm torn on the Russell Wilson deal. Because on the one hand, if you're talking pure value, like a 1 year, $1.2 million contract for Russell Wilson, like look at Russell Wilson's stats. They are not that bad last year at all. Like they are really okay stats. And it's just like he wasn't worth $50 million a year. But the Steelers aren't paying him $50 million a year. They're paying him $1.2 million. And when you compare that to Gardner Minshew, who's getting 12.5 over 2 years, or Sam Darnold, who's getting $10 million for 1 year, and that's the market, you got to be laughing your way to the bank paying 1.2 for Russell Wilson, who I would happily take over either of those guys.
And obviously I think I'm being a little like fanish about this versus that was a prudent financial maneuver and we should all like count our checks and spend them on good players.
Yeah, but the reason I'm torn on it is because it's like, I don't know. I sent you this meme, and it's absolutely the accurate meme of this. It's the illusion of choice, and it's Kenny Pickett or Russell Wilson, and it brings you to the same result of like wild card loss. And it's like to me that's the problem. It's like what I don't love Justin Fields. I don't love Justin Fields, but I didn't understand why the Steelers didn't go and trade like some mid-round picks to say, you know what, maybe Justin Fields is him, maybe he's not him. But let's figure it out for ourselves and try to make a bigger swing than Russ. Like, to me, Russ is just another, like, is he an upgrade over Pickett, over Trubisky, over Mason Rudolph? Yeah. But does he change the outcome of the Steelers? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think you put that really well, and that was kind of my first thought too. I was like, when we signed him, it was like signing a Mitch Trubisky, at least for a much better price. But I'm like, is Mason Rudolph not better than Russell Wilson at this point?
No, he's not.
Okay, fine, maybe. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been a third stringer for 4 years.
Correct.
But yeah, I agree. It's just like, Kenny, Russ, Mitch, Mason, all of them are just like, you plug anyone into our Steelers team, and I think the plus minus on win differential, it might be like, well, besides Mitch Trubisky, would be like 2 games, right? Like we're going to be, as you say, 9-9, 9-7, so, right? We're going to have a winning team.
11-6. I could see that, to me, the peak of this team is 11-6.
Right, but you put a Justin Fields, and I think that's another reason why I've put my team in the losers here. It's like, who knows what that team becomes? We've never really had a player like that since Cordell Stewart in like the late 90s, early 1000s there, where it's like, we can open up a lot. We've been a gadgety offense before. You have that 1-2 punch with Najee and Warren that I had mentioned earlier. We have some good young talent on the perimeter. It's like get Fields in space, start doing some fun Pittsburgh trickery. It just feels like a missed opportunity, as you said, to wind up with another wild card loss or whatever it might be. So anyways, enough about Steel Town. Let me wrap up my other 2 losers while we're here. So I have the Carolina Panthers as my worst loser. I just don't get this team. For a team that struck out massively by picking the wrong franchise quarterback last year, trading away CMC for pennies on the dollar, and then franchising Brian Burns to then trade him away to the Giants so that you can sign Robert Hunt to a 5-year, $100 million a year. Like, they're importing some California marijuana or something to Carolina because these guys are high as.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the Panthers' moves. They're not great in my opinion. Yeah, like Brian Burns. I mean, I understand you need to trade him away because you weren't gonna want to keep him long term. I can get that. I can understand that. He didn't want to stay. You knew that. But the problem was last offseason when he did his hold in, you were offered 2 firsts for Brian Burns. You now turn around a year later and trade him for a second and a fifth. Like, you fumbled the bag hard. The CMC one, not getting it first, like, you got some seconds. That's fine. Taking the wrong QB, like, that was tough. Obviously, in hindsight, we know, but, like, you don't know what
You
it's going to
can't.
be.
Yeah, you don't really.
But, yeah, I'm with you. I don't love the Panthers. I don't love the Panthers' moves thus far. And the Robert Hunt thing makes no sense to me.
And my last one is the Chargers. Again, I don't think Justin Herbert's necessarily the guy. I think losing Eckler, he clearly had a bad year last year. But like, who do they have now? Like, I think the Chargers, if Herbert's the guy, and if he is what everyone thinks and says he is, then you got to be surrounding them with talent and players right now, going out and making a move for T. Higgins, signing Aaron Jones for a year like the Vikings did. Something.
They can't because of Tom Telesco.
What do you mean? Elaborate.
Their GM spent stupid amounts of money on guys that were like overrated AF. And so now they're needing to eat all those contracts. So they were the most over the cap team. And they were capped out. They can't sign guys. Like, they literally were cutting guys today. Pardon?
Capped out with like a bunch of tenured 7th grade PE teachers.
Well, like the J.C. Jackson contract, which was absolutely brutal. Like, they were paying like massive amounts of money to like Mike Williams, who they just cut today. Keenan Allen's got like a $30 million cap hit if they don't restructure him. Like, same with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. So it's like, that's what's kind of like eating the cap on them now. They're not
they have
cap.
bloated.
Yeah, they have bloated. Now, they could restructure away from a lot of that stuff. They haven't really done that. But obviously, when you bring Jim Harbaugh in, Jim Harbaugh's like, no, I want to like fix this team, not just like keep the core together and push the cap down the road because it's not my team.
Yeah, and for the record, I was not considering the Harbaugh hire in this. This was strictly a free agent analysis, right? But yeah, I mean, they're and the idea that you're so cash strapped with no production in terms of like actually accomplishing something in what might be one of the tougher divisions next year, you just got to do more, Chargers. You just got to do more, and I'll short this team next year like I've been doing.
Sure.
All right, what about you? Over to your losers out of free agency.
Biggest loser, Justin Fields. I mean, Justin Fields was like, the talk was like, oh man, like even a month ago, the talk was like, do the Bears choose Justin Fields or like the first overall pick? And then it kind of became clear that the Bears were going to go first overall pick, but even a lot of people thought that was the wrong move. And then it's like, okay, well, where does Justin Fields fit? Okay, well, he fits with the Falcons. Nope, Kirk Cousins going to the Falcons. Well, he fits with the Steelers. The Steelers decide to go cheap and get Russell Wilson. Well, maybe the Raiders. Nope, the Raiders are going with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell and might try to get like a picked guy. And so now it's like literally the only team that makes any sense that's left is the Minnesota Vikings. And I just don't see a world where like the Bears are going to trade him to the Minnesota Vikings because they're division rivals. And so all of a sudden you're in this situation where it's like Justin Fields is almost relegated to being a backup next year. And I'm not the biggest Justin Fields fan, but it's a massive fall from grace being this like hotness that everyone felt like they wanted to like, actually no one wants Justin Fields.
You know, a little sneaky destination for Justin Fields would have been the New York Jets.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I honestly don't hate it.
Aaron Rodgers is like 75. You have in recovering from an Achilles.
Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, exactly. And he tore an Achilles, and as we said, this is not, these old quarterbacks have not been one to perform. So you got like an old man coming back from an Achilles, and then whatever was the offensive quarterback last year. So I think Fields would have been interesting there. Just kind of running through any scenario, or like the Titans maybe, but they got Will Levis, so they don't really need him.
No, exactly. There's no one else like going through. Everyone else either has a young quarterback, has a stable quarterback, like. Again, like the Jets, yeah, sure, the Jets are 100% a team that can do it, but he's not coming in to be the starter, and that's what I mean. Like, Justin Fields is not going to be a starting quarterback in 2024, barring an injury.
I guess, like, the Cardinals could have made a run for him if they didn't think Kyler was the guy anymore, but that's kind of like, do you want like a short Justin Fields, or like, they're kind of the same player in a lot of ways.
Yeah. But yeah, who else do I got? Buffalo Bills. I mean, that's an obvious one with the all the cuts that they had to make thanks to the egregiousness of the Von Miller contract. There's some pretty great memes out there talking about how much like Bills fans hate Von Miller now because of his goddamn albatross of a contract. He had 6 years, $120 million.
Left?
No, that's what he signed for, but he still got a bunch left on it.
Yeah, I was gonna say he still has what's left over from the Chargers, right? So he's getting paid by two teams.
No, not for the Chargers. He was a free agent. He was a free agent when they signed him.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry.
But they signed him like
who's getting paid? Is Russell still getting paid? Like there was a free agent that signed that's still getting paid like $20 million from their old team, unless I'm just completely off the mark. It was Russ, right? Yeah, it was Russ.
Yeah. And then
sorry, I pulled a blank there.
Yeah, my final one is the New York Giants. Just because it's like you lost Saquon, you lost Bryce Huff, and then you traded away a second and a fifth to pay $150 million to Brian Burns, which I think is a bit of an overpay. It's not. Again, this is nothing against the talent of Brian Burns. I would happily take Brian Burns on my team. It's just like you're a team that's not looking to compete. You lost a few of your best players. You went out and spent big money on a defensive player when name me a skill position player on the New York Giants. Rob, name me.
Offense or defense?
No, skill position, offense.
Sterling Shepard.
He might be on the team. Are you confident in that statement?
No.
That's the problem.
I don't know if he might be on the practice squad, okay, fine.
But it's like, this is the thing. It's like, okay, I get it. Like, Brian Burns is a great player, but it's like, you have nobody at wide receiver or running back. You have an old-ass Darren Waller at tight end, and you got Danny Dimes at quarterback, and it's like, I get it. Brian Burns is a good player, but, you lost way too much, paid him way too much, and you have your offense is going to be anemic. Think about how much this offense ran through Saquon. Think about how anemic this offense is going to be now.
And that's where I don't understand, like you said, if you don't have a team to get you to the playoffs or to win playoff games, it's not like they were a piece away, right? That kind of deal makes me feel like you're a piece away kind of team.
Yeah.
Like if Philly had done that instead of Saquon, okay, fine, maybe. But yeah, I agree.
100%. And the problem is these teams, they have the cap, and I understand that the NFL's cap rule is that you have to spend to 90% of the cap. So teams have to spend $220 million. You don't have a choice. And so
I feel working in this nonprofit environment.
Yeah, you gotta spend money. You gotta spend money somewhere. But
they take it away from you.
Yeah. There's a lot of teams that are just okay, well, we're not doing anything, or they're just paying stupid money, and I think the Giants are one of them. The Panthers are another one. These bad teams that are signing contracts that I'm I don't understand the logic here. You are not in a position to win. Sign a shorter term deal or sign a guy that fits the long term image, or make a trade. If you're gonna make a trade for a guy who can fit a long term image, or I don't love the Brian Burns, or fills a hole as well. Why not keep Bryce Huff, try to keep Saquon, pay him whatever the fuck you want, and then go out and trade for a wide receiver. That's
why I shout out that's why I'm like shouting out Las Vegas Raiders, right? Because they were not really in the running. They make the big Christian Wilkins signing, and they get Gardner Minshew. Whatever you might think of
Yeah.
him, I think that's a great. He's a Raider. Doesn't he feel like a Raider to
Little
you,
bit.
right? And so like it kind of matches, and you got to give him at least some credit for trying to make some moves and bring him some players to take a team to the next level. So
Exactly.
that's what you should be doing if you're like the Giants, for instance.
And I
right?
think we look at it and like, I don't think the Christian Wilkins and Gardner Minshew signings tell me like, oh, this team's ready to compete. Yeah, rah, 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 rah. But like at the same time, I'm like, does this make sense for the team that they have built?
Right.
Absolutely. For the Giants, it doesn't make sense. And there's a few teams, and for the Panthers, what they did doesn't totally make sense. But for the Raiders, I don't expect them to compete, but what they did makes sense to get better and to eventually compete.
Even the Steelers, right? Makes a lot of sense. Save some money,
Sure.
bring in a game managing quarterback that has some clout. We brought in a good couple defenders as well. I would love to be in like the war room of some of these organizations to be like, what is their strategy? Especially the shitty ones, like the Panthers. Like
The
who?
shitty ones
like,
are the
what
fun ones. Because the other ones you can kind of like as a semi-logical fan be like, okay, I can understand where the logic is. It's the
Right,
shitty
you did what
teams
you
that
can,
you're like,
you know.
you're like, how did you guys decide on this?
You're like, you know what we're gonna do? Trade away Christian McCaffrey. Pick the wrong quarterback. And then sign a bunch of really expensive players and give away a bunch of other players, and then still have the same shitty team that we had before. It's amazing. Any last kind of final thoughts on free agency? I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
I think we have. Well, that is it for our free agency episode of the Fourth and Goal podcast. I hope you all enjoyed. We'll be back in probably a week or two, might be 2 weeks, to continue to talk about the NFL season and start to prep for the NFL draft coming at the end of April. Y'all don't want to miss it. Either way, we'll see you all next time. Peace.
So long.